And we're on. Kashi Azad, thanks for being on Fitness and Consciousness.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I've found you on, I think, Instagram or Facebook, and you teach Persian Yoga, and you're doing a lot with meals. People may see them as like big clubs, and you're doing a lot of different exercise techniques that way. So can you just, I guess, start off by telling us, we'll get into like more of your background, but maybe start off with what is Persian yoga? What does it include? Where does it, obviously it comes from, Persian, but like how long has this been going on? And just give us a idea of what Persian yoga actually is.
Sure, and greetings to the listeners. So you ask a very, very big question because, the art form that I try to share with people has a very long history. And, to kind of like address your first question of what is Persian yoga, I guess I could say that it's a movement practice. It's a movement protocol. And it's also a very ancient tradition. The word that we use in Persian for this art is Pahlavani, and it is that art really that I'm trying to share and spread. Now, the name Persian Yoga is the name of my business and the name I chose to use to promote this traditional art to a Western audience. I have been practicing this art over 10 years now, and for the last coming close to 4 years, I think, I've been doing this full time as a business. So, quickly, I discovered that, the term Pahlavani and the term Zulkhane, which I will also, talk about because these are related a little later on, were very, very foreign to the demographic, that I'm trying to address. So, I chose this name, Persian Yoga, because the art is, as you mentioned, Persian, and the objective or the goal, I should say perhaps, of this art is to create unification, is to create a unification of all the physical and mental, and to a certain extent also the spiritual qualities and characteristics of you as a human being towards being as strong as possible. And that strength is embodied in this art by the image of the perfect warrior, the knight, the real man, the authentic man, who is honed and sharp to all extent of his capabilities, be it, as I said, physical, mental, or spiritual. So that is kind of like what Pahlavani is about. And as I mentioned, I use the word yoga here as signifying that unification, because that is, of course, the meaning of the word. And so it is the, I suppose, Persian method or Persian expression of a physical practice to attain those characteristics that I mentioned. I hope I'm answering your question right.
Yeah, it's it sounds very good. I've watched a lot of your your videos and your one of the latest ones I saw, it says you're the only Iranian that teaches women yoga openly. So when you're talking about like the Pahlavani, I think I'm pronouncing that close, right? Maybe that doesn't always, it's not always looking like what people in the West would maybe like think of as yoga. We're doing up dog, down dog, warrior 1, 2, that kind of stuff. But you're doing that also, right? You're doing like hatha yoga. We'll just call it like hatha yoga and is that what you're teaching also? And you're the only Iranian doing that? Or what is it that you're, because you said you're the only Iranian that's openly teaching women. This is usually a man's art, and so can you just explain that before I fumble it up too much?
No problem. Yeah, listen, I teach Pahlavani. That's the only thing that I teach, and I teach it openly. You know, if a tree wanted to learn it, I would teach it to a tree. You know, I love this art, and I want to share this art with whomever has the eyes to see and the ears to listen, and the will to derive and practice this art to derive the benefits and reap the fruits of it. So, you know, woman or man, doesn't matter to me. This art is traditionally practiced by men only. And in Iran, you know, the Zulkhane, with the word that I mentioned before, I like to expand on this term a little bit before I continue, is the place where they practice Pahlavani and where they hold the Pahlavani ceremonies. Or for simplicity, I'll just say Persian Yoga. So that's where they practice Persian Yoga. It is the word itself, Zulkhane, means the house of strength, but it's really a temple. So this is temples that some of them very old. Where I learned this art, the temple is 500 years old, and there's been continuous, you know, practice uninterrupted for 500 years. And this is where the men gather and where they hold the Pahlavani ceremonies. And it's a ceremony that worships strength. So you're doing a ritual movement practice with the objective to invoke strength in your being, you know. And this is done to the drum beat of the Morshed. The Morshed is the Guru. That's what it is referred to as. And the recitations of spiritual text, ancient mystic poetry from Rumi, Hafiz, Ferdowsi, and others, that is meant to invoke this spiritual strength in you at the same time as you're practicing this physical art. You know, so in the Zulkhane today, women are not allowed to enter the pit, the octagonal pit. There's an octagonal pit at the center of the Zulkhane, where the warriors of old and, you know, the practitioners of today have to enter. It's a sunken pit, you know, so you have to go below ground level, earth level. You have to go below earth level, and it's an octagon. And in that octagon, the men perform this practice ritual. And these institutions, the temples, are privately owned, you know. So there are private gyms in a way, you can call them, like a CrossFit center, I guess, comparison, you know, to what would be the equivalent in the West, I suppose, you know. These are privately owned, and the tradition is that women are not allowed into the god or the octagonal pit where the men, they practice. And that's kind of like a place where the owner decides what the rules of the house is, So I'm not going to comment about that. That's like up to whomever, how they're going to run their zulkhane or operate their, facilities. But that has obviously the effect that women are not taught. And traditionally, it's a man's art, so, and that's kind of like how it's been there. But obviously, I don't live in Iran. I'm in Sydney, Australia, and here I share it openly with everyone. And that has had some consequences and I guess mild repercussions for me. But I stand on where I am, and that is to share this art openly with whoever wants to learn and gain the benefits of it.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, and like you said, if people can like mind their own business. So if I have a business, I just want to teach men. You're not going to tell me anything. You're just going to open up another business. And you're going to teach everyone. You're going to teach women, and then I can do my thing. I can do what I think is right. You can do what you think is right. So I like how you worded that, because there is, I think there's a reason for both, and kind of like maybe like depending on what the intention is. Like there's like someone I know. Her name's Himalaya. She teaches. It's kind of like yoga stuff, and she has like some classes that are just for women. It doesn't mean like, it's nothing. It's nothing bad. It's just like, here's something that's just for women. And like yesterday, last night I was at a sweat lodge, kind of like a Lakota style sweat lodge, and like one of the men was talking about having like being able to like mentor other men, because the stuff we're going through, and we're always like praying for the women. We're trying to help the women. We're trying to do all this as men. We don't pray for ourselves. And so I kind of see it both ways. But can you tell me like why in Iran it was just for the women? I mean, it's like a warrior art, so that kind of makes sense in a way for it to be men, or I can at least see it that way. But can you tell us like why it was like that, and then what were the consequences of you teaching women also, and who are these consequences coming from?
Sure. Look, I think it's very poignant, I suppose, the point that the experience that you just shared with me, in that, absolutely. I mean, I think personally it's a beautiful thing that there is, female-only circles and men-only circles, because without getting into the differences and gender politics and these things, but there are differences, and I think it's a beautiful thing that you'd have the opportunity to celebrate both, like together and separately. So I think it's a beautiful thing that there is a temple where you can go and worship the masculine energy, and a brotherhood, so to speak, and it adds a lot of value. And in particular about the mentorship that you mentioned as well, because you're entering into, when you go to a zulkhane, you're entering into a brotherhood. You can't just show up and pay a cover charge and just train there. You need to be invited into their circle, and you need to sometimes sit and observe for a while. I mean, that can go on for days and weeks, before they invite you into their sacred pit. I mean, that's the octagon, and some of these brotherhoods are very ancient, and some of these brotherhoods, have played history-altering role in events that have occurred throughout the history of, the nation. So, as I said, you need to be invited into the circle. So, you know, going back to the second part of your question about, you know, why it's just men, that has obviously, you know, a lot to do with the history of Iran itself as a nation. And, you know, I don't want to be discussing politics because that's not kind of like what I like to do. I like to share information about Persian yoga, but I think it's kind of like inevitable, I guess, that you know, currently in the situation that exists as a consequence of a long history, it's that women are not taught. Has it always been that way? No. And throughout my own research, I have strong indication that not only were there very strong, you know, female participation, but there were very, very strong female leadership as well. That came out as a result of, you know, this art form, you know, and the history of it. So the third part of your question, I suppose you were asking, why is it so? I mean, that's like, I hope I tried to answer the question, and pardon me if I missed anything.
No, I think I got it. So the other part was like what kind of consequences were you running into? So did you learn in?
Oh yeah, okay.
Did you learn in Iran?
No, I went there. I mean, I grew up in Sweden, and my family migrated from Iran during the war. And you know, from the age of 7, I grew up in Sweden. Where, you know, I'll tell you a little bit about how I came into contact with this art. It was through my uncle, who was or is I should say, is a practitioner of the arts, you know. And I went back to Iran to specifically to learn this art, and I traveled to the most famous temples with the longest tradition, and I learned from their morsheds or their gurus who teach at those temples, and you know, I've been practicing it ever since. Like, it was just like love at first experience, you know. I was invited to go to a Zurkhane, and I went there, and I was invited to step into go and practice with them. And at the time, I was mid-20s and very fit. I used to be a competitive martial artist, you know, at amateur level. And, you know, very confident as you are when you're like 20 and, you know, sure of yourself and so on. And I stepped into the goad or the pit with these gentlemen that they were all senior to me, you know, in age, in sense that, you know, they were around 40 and 60s and everything in between there, you know. And in my arrogance, I was just like, you know, who these old guys I'm going to be training with, you know. And we started by performing, you know, they started by performing the sequence of training, which is very important within the art, and the group training or the group circle. They start with doing push-ups on the Shena or the push-up board, and you know, they did close to 250 push-ups on the Shena in a flow, and that was my first experience, and I was completely blown away because that was just a warm-up, you know, because then we came to the Meel or the clubs, and yeah, so I love a good challenge, and I love a good strength training, and for me that was just like, as I said, love at first experience. So it was very challenging, but also very, very invigorating. You know, afterwards I just felt really great. And I looked around and I saw these older guys, you know, doing such great strength feat that had me on my knees after like 50 push-ups, you know, and they were just keeping going. So that's when I knew, like, I need to have this in my life, because that's how I like to be, you know, strong and whole and nimble and movable, you know, like these guys were.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've had some like similar experiences, like go to like a judo class, and I was, you know, saying like 20 something. I was like 18, 19 when I started. But, you know, I'm lean and strong. I'm already a personal trainer. I can lift, and I'm fighting some senior citizen, and for some reason I'm flying through the air upside down every time he touches me. Like, what is going on here? It was like, yeah. So it's just amazing, and it shows you that that's the right way, because you got people that are that maybe wouldn't look at first sight like they're physically superior than you or technically, but then you get a hold of each other, and you know you see each other moving or lifting, and it's that right away you can either kind of accept it and you're learn from it, or what a lot of people do is I think they just run away. So like when you're saying like that, the women that were doing these art, I wouldn't be surprised if you found that a lot of the women ended up, I don't know like what the percentages would be, but like outperforming the men. They're like even in leadership positions, because like some of the classes that I've taught can be pretty tough, and I've had guys kind of, I guess maybe like wimp out isn't the nicest way to put it, but then like two of the most consistent ones I have are women. It's like, because they're tough enough, so maybe they're not outlifting a man, but they're outlifting some for sure. But women have a toughness and a mental endurance, pain threshold. I don't know what all it is, but in some ways, just women are just a lot tougher, and maybe, you know, maybe that has something to do with it also. Like, so the ones that do stick around and learn from you, do you find that do they end up being more consistent, or do they end up having better technique because their strength isn't as good or something like that? So like what's the experience there? Does that make sense? I don't know if I made sense.
Look, maybe if I try to answer it this way, strength is universal, but it's also an individual experience, you know. So there are men and women, and again, like it's like the strength. It's yours to develop. So as in my personal experience, if you're asking me as a coach, I've had you know, the full spectrum, you know, of very strong guys that can train with me, very strong women that can train with me. And if I were to comment on their specific kind of like capacities and differences, and put it into context of Persian yoga, I would say that, you know, Persian yoga or Pahlavani was really designed by men for men, and it was like, it's a very masculine art. And as I mentioned, you know, I can't talk about lifting and coaching in the context of like the Western gym experience, because I've done that too. I've been a boxing coach for a very long time, and again, that's like a completely different context. But in the context of Persian yoga, again, you know, it's an art form that has been designed with the masculine sensibilities in mind, you know. So it's a very, again, I answer it this way. Some women can do it. Most women cannot, because of the biological differences between the men and female genders, you know. It's a very upper body heavy, and obviously women have less muscle density in comparison to men. And of course, that also is a gray area. Depends like what men you're talking about. I've met men that can't even do one push-up, which is a disgrace, I think. But I've met women that can do, 200 push-ups, and they've done it with me. So, that I can't comment on specific cases, so because the spectrum is broad. But in the context of Persian yoga, it is more masculine oriented, and it's, as I said, designed by men for men. But that doesn't mean women can't do it, and that doesn't mean women shouldn't do it. I mean, they like to do it, sure, let them do it. Like, what's the problem,
Yeah, I was just wondering, because for jujitsu, so it's going to be you go to a jujitsu class, it's going to be mostly guys, but women can go too, of course. And sometimes the women's technique will be more pure because they're typically not going to be like more aggressive. So you might have a man just like aggressive, powerful, maybe like a football player or wrestler, and they'll use that kind of energy, where the woman might be more like soft, which is what jiu-jitsu by definition is. So they end up like developing their technique more, or even like guys that are not as physically strong or powerful end up better than the guys that are physically strong and powerful. They end up having like better technique.
Yeah, I get you now. I get you. Well, in that sense, I guess I could say it this way. One of the qualities and characteristics that Persian yoga develops is a sense of rhythm, and that's a very, very important quality. And the sense of rhythm is, what we believe in the Zulkhana tradition, and also like my personal, what I believe is that it really sets apart the, the great martial artists from the best. That's like when you have rhythm, it just takes you to a whole different level. I mean, just to give you an example, Bruce Lee was a cha-cha dancing champion, and Jean-Claude Van Damme does Western ballet. Jackie Chan did Chinese ballet, to give just a few examples. But my point is that that quality of rhythm is very important. So that's been integrated, and going back to describing some of the qualities that Persian yoga develops, as I mentioned very earlier on, the aim is to develop a perfect warrior from the sense and sensibilities of the Persian culture, of course. But that perfect warrior is equal measures, warrior and poet, mover and dancer. So having that quality and characteristics of rhythm is very important. That's why our practices are done to a drum beat, which invokes rhythm, and they're done as a dance. Like, when you learn to swing the Meel correctly, you're dancing with the Meel, and that's what the men are doing in the pit, in the octagon. They're standing shoulder to shoulder, and sometimes it gets very crowded, and they're swinging these big clubs, and they don't hit each other. And it's not supposed to hit your body. It's not supposed to touch your body, the meat, and it's not supposed to, of course, touch another person, because this is strength training. The objective of the art, the development, is strength conditioning for martial artists. And so these guys are developing that strength and rhythm through the process that I mentioned to you. And I find that women have more natural tendency to pick up rhythm in comparison to men. Again, the spectrum is broad. But as what you're saying, would women be predisposed for this art in the sense of picking up the rhythm and the flow? It appears to me it's easier for them than for the guys.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can definitely see that. So these like meals and like clubs of various sorts and maces, and all those seem to be making, they just seem to be getting like more and more popular all the time. And I remember, or I was reminded, I used to watch a lot of professional wrestling when I was a kid, and I'm sure I saw it at the time, but I was reminded, however long ago it was, of the Iron Sheik in wrestling. But you'd see him using his Meel, like these big giant clubs. And at the time, I guess I knew what they were. I was always in strength and fitness since I was a really little kid, but it didn't sink in like I understand it now. Can you explain like where did the Meels come from? Like how long they've been used, and like why that?
Yeah, look, that's a very interesting question, And Pahlavani Khosrow Vaziri, as you know him as the Iron Sheik, he's a practitioner of the arts and obviously a very accomplished wrestler as well. And as he says, it makes you humble. This art makes you humble, and that's kind of like the ethos, I suppose, that or the spiritual characteristics that you're aspiring to in the practice. It's strength and humility, and that's going back to the practice is that he obviously demonstrated the use of the Meel, which is the third art of the 7 arts of Pahlavani. These arts, there's a sequence to them, and they're very, very important, and they're done in a ritual manner in the Temple of Strength, or the Zulkhane, and it has a very great significance because practicing the sequence of this art the way it has been taught for thousands of years, chest to chest, in a lineage of master to apprentice to modern day. And you mentioned about the popularity of it increasing, is that this is as ancient as time itself. This art has been practiced, is recognized by UNESCO as the oldest living form of such practice, and so of strength training and martial conditioning, as such form of practice is considered the oldest living tradition, and it's not going away. Basically, my point is that that's how long it's not a fad, So it works, and more people in the West are becoming aware of it, and they're starting to gain the benefits from it. It's been there all along, and in various forms and names. The British came across it and called it the Indian Club because that's where they came across it first. Mm-hmm. And that's now touching on the history of this art. It exists in both the Indian and the Iranian tradition because these people were once one. Hmm. And the Indo-Iranians, or the Aryans, this is the art of their warriors. This is you have to go back very far in history and look at the conditions where these people they lived. It was tribal. It still is in very large areas, and there were nomads and pastoralists. And they protected their borders, and they had a function in the society, the function of the warrior. And to develop these warriors, they had schools, they had temples where they taught these warriors how to be warriors, and make them strong and prepared in all aspects that, you could encounter. So they developed this curriculum. And there's a sequence to this curriculum. You can't just pick and start doing clubs because it looks cool. It's part of a seven stages, 7 arcs of a protocol. But when I say you can't just pick and choose like that, I mean, of course you can. You can do anything you want, you know. But and not if you're doing it as part of a system. If you're doing it, if you're practicing as part of a system, then you have to proceed systematically and methodically. And I guess that's what Pahlavani brings. I guess it's a structured and systematic art that has been developed throughout the last couple of thousand years, because the first written reference that survived to this day and that we can find to Pahlavanis or the Pahlavans, which were the title. The Pahlavan is a title that they gave to warriors. It's like calling in the comparison in Western tradition, you call them knights, you know. So this was like the term that was used in those areas. They call them Pahlavans. And these Pahlavans, you know, used as I mentioned, this is a very ancient tradition. Used the first tool of mankind, the club, the first instrument and the first weapon of mankind. It's the club, you know. And so it's kind of like is built around that, and that practice is symbolically represented in the Persian yoga art with the art of the Meel, or which is a club in itself. But it's designed for you know, strength development, for the use of I guess, if you want to put it into functional context, a different type of handheld weapons. But it's not for teaching you how to use those weapons, although it develops those skills too. It's mainly used as a strength development tool. You know, it's a tool that provides neurological input and teaches you new skills and new ways of moving while strengthening and conditioning your body physiologically, if that makes sense. You know, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yeah, it does. So it's one of 7 arts. Can you tell us the other ones?
Sure. So the ritual practice of Pahlavani resembles symbolically a ancient battle, you know, and I'm going to use terms and refer to tools that you possibly haven't even seen, but if you go, I suppose, to PersianYoga.com or check out my Instagram at Persian Yoga, you will see examples of these various tools that I'm going to mention to you. The first art, or the first stage of the battle, is shields, and we use the tool sang that resembles a shield. And it's very heavy, and we do pressing with it. We press the shield, we press the sang, you know, and it resembles the first stage of battle when you assume shield formations, you know. So symbolically, that has been represented in this art as the use of the sang or the shields that you do presses with, and you press the shields in various geometrical configurations to develop, obviously, strength and endurance, but also coordination and activation of I suppose, the body, but primarily the neuromusculoskeletal system, and engaging the core, to then roll from the back to all fours and do quadruped movement patterns on the Shena, which is the second art, which then you're doing dynamic movements on the Shena. You're doing push-ups, so you roll from the back onto the 4 hands and feet, and you're doing push-ups, and you're doing dynamic flexibility movements as you're doing these push-ups to develop the strength and skill and movement range, you know, flexibility, in 360-degree configuration, basically getting up and moving in different planes of motion and changing changing elevation and things like this. This resembles the second stage of battle when the two siding armies, I suppose, or warriors in this case, I guess, are clashing into each other, and you're pushing and you're being pushed down, and you're going to push yourself up, and you have to push yourself up maybe in a different range of motion because something's coming at your head and something's coming at your back, and all the chaos of battle, I suppose, And symbolically, that's represented in Persian yoga or in Pahlavani with the use of the Shena. That I described what the practice, how it is shaped. And then, obviously, it's the main part of the battle is like when you're using weapons and you're bashing each other up, basically. And that's represented in the art of the Meel, and that's the third art. So you see, we went from the back to all fours to standing on 2 feet and manipulating 2 tools that we're holding in each arm. And, this has been suggested in other people's research that it's, the ancient motor program that each individual has that is triggered through their external environment throughout their first year of development as a child. So that they go from the rolling on the back to all fours, start crawling, and then they get up and stand on the 2 feet and start walking around and touching with their hands, exploring their environment. So that is kind of like the protocol that we're going through in the practice of Pahlavani with load, with external resistance to develop strength in the full range of body movement on all the planes of motion. And as I mentioned, that's a third stage. The fourth stage of battle is that, that's it. You guys have bashed each other. Now you're either chasing them or you're running away that they're chasing you, So that's like the cardiovascular endurance. And we do that with the fourth art of Pahlavani, which we refer to as Pazadan, which is a cardio aerobic conditioning done as interval training. It's like high intensity intervals. And the fifth art is the art of the kabade, or the steel bow. It's imagine a bow made out of steel, and instead of a string, it has a chain. It's quite heavy. And you're lifting this instrument overhead, and it develops range of motion and skills also for full overhead range of motion movement. And symbolically, again, this is representing the stage of battle that's it. Now you chase the enemy up to their encampments or their castle or their fortress or whatever. And now they're behind the walls. They're throwing things at you from the top of the walls. I'm so sure you've seen this 100 times in movies, And now you have to protect yourself in the overhead range of motion. And that's why we use the kabade, or the steel bow. And they also climb the rope in the Zurkhane, which I'm sure, like, as a physical enthusiast, you know how great of an exercise climbing ropes is. And they do that symbolically to represent that you're climbing over the wall of the enemy. And the sixth art is the art of kushti, or the art of wrestling. And this is when you're going man to man with the enemy and taking them down one by one. That's symbolically what's represented in the stage of battle. And that's when they do kushti Pahlavani, or Pahlavani wrestling. This art goes back to combat wrestling, where the knights had to ride up close to an enemy and take him by the belt and throw him off the horse, So it's belt wrestling. And from that tradition, Pahlavani wrestling grew catch wrestling and freestyle wrestling today, which is the Olympic art. And there are a multitude, like many Zurkhane practitioners that have been world champions, Olympic champions, and if you're a fan of wrestling, you would know that Iran has a very strong tradition in the sport and in the art, which comes directly out of the Zulkhane tradition, or the Pahlavani tradition. So that's the connection there as well. So that's the sixth art of Pahlavani. And the seventh art of Pahlavani is the art of the drum and the bell, which the Morshed or the Guru uses to direct the ceremony, to lead the practice. So after you mastered all the physical arts, now you're really mastering an artful instrument, the art of reciting and the art of, basically leading the worship, so to speak. And that's the seven arts of Pahlavani or Persian Yoga.
Yeah, that's really cool. I knew there was a lot to it, but I didn't know as much as you just spelled out there. There is something like fascinating about like some of these like warrior traditions where like at first it's like maybe not such a or like in its like initial development, it's not like a spiritual thing. We're trying to survive on a battlefield. You can leave your philosophy at home. We need you to just kill people because that's what's going on. We're going to get invaded. Put your book down, pick up the sword. We need to fight. And then maybe there's like these times of peace, or maybe there's or not times of peace, but people have to find this peace of mind. So like the samurai, they might be out on the battlefield and there's killing and just mayhem. And then they go in for a tea ceremony and everything's just calm. And you're in a Zen state where there's not all the action going on. And so it's kind of what I was thinking about a little bit, or what it was reminding me of when you're going through all these different things. And when you said the warrior as a poet also, and there's something about maybe as we get a little bit like older, more into adulthood. I'm 39, and so I guess I've always been like into like philosophy and religious stuff. I'm never a particular religion, but I see like a lot in like metaphors. So like some like really simple things will have like deeper and deeper metaphorical meaning to me. So something as simple as like I posted something the other day. I had some kids in my kids class. Sometimes we throw tomahawks, and sometimes these tomahawks are just sticking, and everybody looks so great. And then sometimes we just miss every time, or not really miss, but it's not sticking. But there's still like some philosophy in that. Like it doesn't have to stick for it to be effective. If somebody throws a tomahawk at you and it just ricochets off your head and doesn't stick, it's still going to be a very effective thing. So it was interesting, this whole system, how it's put together and how it develops, like the warrior as a complete like person also, and through your research of it, and you said your uncle has been a practitioner of this for some time. Like at the beginning stages of it, was it more like, this is just war, we don't need philosophy, we just need killers, people that can kill and defend our women and children and borders? And then was it like more of the philosophy stuff added later, or was it kind of born as this complete system?
Okay, listen. It's an art form, I suppose, and we're talking about war, which I think is a horrible thing, and we're talking about like, but there's obviously a reality of humanity, and these type of aspects. So all those kind of like political ideas around this topic aside, talking about the human, because we're talking about human movement. We're talking about humans and human development, and I talk about the physical characteristics, and I said also that it's not whole. That's not. We're talking about the human as a whole. We're talking about the human as again, I don't like to use these division, because that's not the reality of you. That's not you. You're not divided. You are one whole human. And but for the sake of kind of discussion, it's in the West primarily they're talking about the physical, the body, mind, and spirit kind of division. I don't see it that way, and we don't see it that way in this art. We're talking about the human as a whole, and to not address the human as a spiritual being, because obviously in the West is primarily, you address the human from a physical point of view, because that's why you have so many different physical development programs and different ways of addressing like physical strength, and of course the mental aspect is obviously very strong, because there's that education and I guess cognitive exercises that also exist, but to not address the person from a spiritual point of view. And right now, I'm not saying that that's not done in the West. I'm just saying that it's not done in an integrated way to address body, mind, and spirit, integrated approach for development of the human as a whole, to be a strong human being, not just be a strong physical human being, not just be a strong mental human being, but like really be a strong human being. In the Persian expression, that's the education that they come up with. And it took thousands of years. And you mentioned that, okay, at this stage of life, we just need killers. I mean, to make a human being into a killer, that's very one-sided. It's not a human being, that's a machine, And not to kind of like address the psychology of it, because we're social animals, and that's why practice is done in a circle. We're facing each other. We're sharing our energy with each other. We're doing it as a brotherhood. We're doing it as we did close to each other. In the Zulkhanen, there is a very beautiful tradition of the initiation. The initiation of someone into their brotherhood. And going off on a tangent here, they drink what is referred to as the water of strength. It's salt water. They drink salted water as a form of initiating a new member into their brotherhood. And that signifies, water signifying life, and salt is used for preservation, is to preserve life. And salt is the mineral that we sweat, minerals that comes out in our sweat. So it's symbolic that we're going to sweat together, So what I'm trying to point out is that biopsychosocial aspect of a human being, also the social aspect of the human being, is to be taken into consideration. And that's why I believe that CrossFit communities have been so successful, into spreading, because there's a need there. There's a need for social bonding, and creating your tribe and creating your clan and sticking together and creating a community and do what's good, not just for yourself. The definition of strength in Pahlavani art is perseverance. That's the definition of strength. You have to have perseverance. And we pray also as we practice the art. We pray throughout. It's a whole prayer. The whole art is a prayer. But, we pray throughout the art. And we pray for strength for us in overflow that we can give to others. And that's that whole biopsychosocial aspect of the human being that I'm referring to. But of course, You know, this is the approach of the warrior. You know, this is the approach of that caste, of that part of history, of that part of mankind that needed to, you know, either defend or attack, you know, whatever the case may be, needed warriors. And, you know, you look into the history of the region, and you talked about invaders coming and invaders. I mean, you name it, they've been there. Invaders like from, you know, very ancient past. I'm talking with the Greeks and Macedonians to Arabs and Mongols and Turks and British and American. You know, it's been invasion, like, you know, nonstop. So they needed to prepare these men. Now, of course, we don't fight that way anymore, but we still need to be strong, if not stronger today. You know, the strength hasn't changed. You know, the characteristics and the qualities of the human being, of the warrior, so to speak, hasn't changed. Our methods have changed, of course, but that's not what this art is addressing. It's not trying to make you a killer. It's not trying to make you a warrior. It's trying to make you a strong human being. Mm. But that expression comes from that human experience, that human experience of, you know, being realistic about things and, you know, being a warrior.
Yeah, this is all really just kind of amazing, like some of the stuff that you're saying and some of the stuff that I've been thinking about. Is like I developed my own system, like what am I going to teach people? I teach kids, I teach adults, and so it's like, I've, you know, kind of developing my own thing, and I copy stuff from anything I think is good. I'm not afraid to like take somebody's ideas. I mean, that's why we put it out there, because we want to share it. So take what I think is good and put it into my own system. And like at my kids' class, I teach. It's mostly like kettlebell stuff, body weight stuff. But we're also like at the end of the kids class, they read an ancient story from somewhere. It's like one of the kids, I train at a wilderness survival school. And so there's this a buffalo skin, bison skin, and one of the kids will sit on it, and usually like a few of them will get on there, and they'll read an ancient story. Maybe it's from India or Native American, or just like any kind of like ancient story for like 5 minutes. I have like tons of books from the library. Yeah, I want them to get stronger, but we meditate at the end, and one of the kids will say when the meditation starts and when it stops. And I'm like trying to develop them, not just, I want them to be able to like lift a lot of weight, have a lot of endurance, mental strength, but also like understand like some of these ancient stories. Like some of them are like kind of odd, and it's our Western mind might have a hard time getting our minds around some of these ancient stories. Like, what does that mean? But to get them like introduced to these concepts, but like you're talking about it it just makes me want to learn more about it, because this whole system it's not, and like you were saying, like the whole thing is a prayer, like this whole system. So you're with like this, I know you're teaching women also, but you're doing like this very masculine thing, and you're close to each other. And if somebody messes up and hits somebody in the head with one of these meals, you could do some damage, but you like trust each other, and you're right there, and you're sweating, and you're training for something and developing not just your strength and like your ego stuff, but like your spirit and your but the whole thing as a prayer is what a lot of it sticks out. Like so much of what you said, I want to go back and listen again. But like the whole thing as a prayer, like, can you, I guess without me like rambling on about like what, some of my own experience, like I was just thinking like the sweat lodge I did last night, maybe this will spark, give you an idea of like what I'm trying to ask, because I don't have it formed in my mind very well.
No,
But
I think I get you. I think I get you. Look, I have to express it this way. What I'm talking about, the worship and the worship to masculinity, towards masculinity, and the ritual being performed as a ceremony, and the ritual having those high reverberations, beyond just the physical, is really an experience to be had in the Zulkhane. I can't give a person that experience outside the Zulkhane, and that's how I'm operating at the moment, because Zulkhane, there are over 500 of them in Iran and also in the neighboring countries, but it's not a phenomenon in the West, of course, and I guess the closest thing to that experience today in a Western context is, the yoga studios, where they have kind of like tried to make it, and that's what yoga is so beautiful, and Indian yoga, so fantastic, that's what it has brought to the West. And look at it, it's just phenomenal, and some of these places is really, people go to there to meditate. They're really acting as temples, like gateways to temples, like that, So looking at that, and seeing that there is a need for that, and there is a demand for that in the kind of like Western culture, because we're all human beings, we all want and feel the same things, and so giving that deep spiritual experience to someone from this art, because that's what this whole process and that physical practice is aimed towards, is to give you the experience of the state of flow, and to give you the experience of the state of grace, of being strong and being present, and being fully engaged. All systems honed and sharp, and that's it's aiming to give you that experience. I mentioned, some of the arts, and they're all practices, and in the fourth art, the Pahlavani, the whole cardio aerobic section is culminates in whirling, and whirling is one of the very ancient practices of Sufi mystics, it's a movement meditation practice. It's a transcendental movement meditation practice that has obviously functional relationships back to the battle and that context, but without diverging too far. Now, what I want to say is that, it's meant to give you that experience, that spiritual and lifted and invigorating feeling that you can get. And that can't be done, in my point of view, outside the Zulkhane. And, going back to how that can relate into Western context, and some of the activities that you do yourself is, very preventative, that's the role of the physical professional, is to act like a very, very preventative. And so it's a very important role, than just let's treat it when the problem arises. It's very preventative. It's just to get you strong and keep you strong. And, medicine is very kind of like reactive. It's like when something has already gone wrong and you need to treat it, and that focuses on your life. That's your organic life, and it's very, very important. I'm not saying that it's not important, but movement therapy is preventative, and it primarily focuses on your quality of life. If you're strong and you're healthy, as when I'm saying healthy, I'm not talking about that you don't have. I'm not talking about the absence of disease. I'm talking about you being whole. And that's, again, to use those, what's it called, categorizations that often use mind, body, spirit, and so on, for you to be whole, to achieve unification in yoga, it needs to be done through a prayer. It needs to be done through worship. It needs to be done in that context, because we know today through research that how important the role of exercise is, how important the role of movement is, because we are, we have evolved around movement. We have evolved for movement, but that movement isn't just biomechanic. That movement is also spiritual. That's why we do movement meditation. So I hope that kind of like answer your question that way.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's like one of those things, I guess, like the more you dig into it, the deeper it gets, and you get.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you, bro. It's just like over 2,500-year-old tradition. We have records. I mean, there is reference to the Pahlavans and the Pahlavani in the Bhagavad Gita, which are ancient Hindu scriptures, But we have reasons to believe it's even older than that. So we're really talking about like more than a culture, like as I mentioned earlier on, this is the oldest living tradition of its kind.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So much to dig into. I could just keep. I guess we've been going for like about an hour 15 here. I'm not in a hurry or anything. I could just kind of like keep like asking you about this stuff for hours. But if you want, we could. If you have, is there anything else that you were wanting to? Is there any like part of it that we haven't touched on yet that you're wanting to get into, or do you want to start to wrap it up?
Listen, brother. Like as I said to you just now, it's just such a vast topic, and I dearly love it. So I can talk about it. I think, as you say, until the cows come home. But I think I hope I've answered your questions. And I don't have anything in particular that I would like to mention other than that, it doesn't matter how much I talk about it. It doesn't matter what you read about it and what you see about it on YouTube. Don't worry about those are just misleading. It's the experience itself that counts. It's when you experienced it, you will know what I'm talking about. But until then, it's just like abstract and mind words. And that's why I also mentioned that the sequence is very important, because it's trying to it's kind of like a protocol. It's like a program. It's setting you up for a greater experience. So that's my understanding of it. That's my experience of it, and that's what I hope that I've come close to, making myself understood and sharing this with you and your audience. And as always, if you feel like chatting again, just reach out and look up my stuff on PersianYoga.com and social media and all that stuff. And as we say in the art, be tireless.
Yeah, I would definitely like to have you on again. I'll probably listen to the episode again, and I mean, I've been looking into what you've been doing for a while now, especially leading up to you coming on. So I had a good idea of what I wanted to ask you about, but it's different after someone is on, and then I get to know you as a person more and what you like keep repeating. So then for next time, maybe I'll have, I prepared for this one, but next time I'll be maybe even more prepared. Or maybe you'll be like, oh, I wanted to actually get into this more, or I wanted to. So yeah, I would like to have you on again for sure. How do people get in touch with you? You do teach people online, right?
Yeah, and that's been really exciting because I get to reach a greater audience of people that are interested in Pahlavani and generally interested in becoming stronger people. But I do teach online. And it's a really cool experience that I've streamlined in the sense that, it takes very active participation. It takes a very active participation from the role of like the attendee. So if we were to do it together, like you need to prepare for this, basically I'm commenting and providing insights in how to optimize your practice and how to avoid common mistakes, and so that you can get proficient sooner, so that you can enjoy the benefits sooner. That's kind of like the approach I take to that. But of course, I do also face-to-face for those who happen to be where I live, which is in Sydney, Australia. And to get in touch with me, I think, there's so many different ways these days that it's almost nauseating. But social media, Instagram, at Persian Yoga, persianyoga.com. You can email me, Kashi at persianyoga.com, any of the above. And I hope that I can, share this a beautiful journey that I'm on, because it's really given me lots and lots and lots. And I can share it with you, and primarily share the strength with you. So again, I hope I answered all your questions. And as I said, be tireless.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely learned a lot from it, and it makes me want to develop my own system even better, learn more about your system, develop my own more thorough.
Yeah, look, I just got to just say one thing about that. This is not my system.
Right.
I didn't create this. This is a very ancient tradition. I'm just trying to share it. I'm just trying to share it with you. I'm just trying to facilitate and share it with people. As I said, it gave me so much benefits that I can't claim this by no way, shape, or form to be mine. And I didn't copy. I didn't copy anyone. This is an ancient tradition that I have learned, and I'm passing it on. This is genuine deal. I'm not trying to claim any of it as my own. All I'm doing is trying to make it easier for people to experience it.
Yeah, it's really great. It's just a fascinating system. So I guess we can start to wrap it up. Thanks again for being on. Again, you can be on again for sure. And so do you have some final thoughts for us, final words for everyone before I let you go?
I guess I could say, strength is divine. Strengthen your divinity and, become who you are.
I like it. That's a good place to stop. I like how you said that there. Well, I will stop the recording, and I'll talk to you for just a minute once we're done. Thanks again for being.
All right. God bless.